We start our show today with breaking news. Our Adrian Wojnarowski reporting that Doc Rivers is the new head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. This comes less than 24 hours after first-year head coach Adrian Griffin was dismissed by the team despite having the second-best record in the Eastern Conference. So here to help us digest it all, Adrian Wojnarowski, Michael Wilbon, Shanae Gumake, I'm Malika Andrews, and Kendrick Perkins is here with us as well. Woj, you reported yesterday that Doc and the Bucks, they were talking. How did this come together?
Yeah, they started talking yesterday afternoon through late last night and then nailed down a deal this morning.
Yep.
Doc, this is a multi-year deal. This is an organization that really didn't have a plan B if they didn't get Doc Rivers and didn't convince him to join them. When they made the move on Adrian Griffin, the thought of what they were looking for, a veteran coach, a coach who spent a lot of time in the playoffs, obviously a championship coach in Doc Rivers.
Yeah.
He fit a lot of boxes. And you are limited in this window of time trying to do a coaching search. It's not like the offseason when there's just many more coaches available to you. But Doc Rivers was available. Listen, he's got a lot of history in the city of Milwaukee, played his college basketball at Marquette, grew up down the road with Michael Wilbon in Chicago. And I think for Doc Rivers, the chance now to coach a team with Giannis Antetokounmpo, Damian Lillard, and to do something he's wanted very much to do since 2008 in Boston, and that's win a championship. The opportunity is there. And I think Doc Rivers sincerely believed when he came to ESPN that he was going to be here, that maybe the kinds of jobs that would appeal to him, maybe he wouldn't be a candidate for anymore. He was a finalist in the Final Two in Phoenix last summer. That went to spring. That went to Frank Vogel.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, this job opens in Milwaukee with Adrian Griffin. And now Doc Rivers, and I'm told that Dave Yeager is a very real possibility to join his coaching staff, former head coach in Sacramento, Memphis. He was with Doc Rivers in Philly for 3 years. That's somebody he can really lean on walking in the door in Milwaukee.
Of course, he has history with Milwaukee, with Marquette. As you mentioned, his jersey is already in the rafters with Marquette in Pfizer Forum. I just want to start with your reaction to this, Wilbon.
It's a wow. Woj mentioned the jobs that Doc thought might fit him and he might be a fit for in the summer. Mm-hmm. And then you get to the part where he's happy, literally, with his new gig and his new life, which was sort of a return to an old life with us, at the table calling games and living without that pressure. But it doesn't leave him. Woj, we talk about all the time, coaches want to coach, right? And so that's still there. And in the Bucks, he gets a team with two Hall of Famers still in their primes. I mean, maybe Dame is a little later in the prime, but still in their primes. They're ready to win now. They think they are. It was clear that they weren't going to win on the path that they were. And I don't put that all on Adrian Griffin. You got to put some of that on management and some things that were going on. He didn't have his complete staff in place. There were some internal issues.
Right.
You don't get rid of Drew Holiday and think you're going to be the same kind of team with the same kind of identity. Mm-hmm. That's not going to happen. All of which Doc is aware of, but as he steps in there, he's got two, again, Hall of Fame players on a roster. I'm not going to say it's everybody's lined up behind the Celtics, all right? But you got teams chasing hard, and Bucks management knew that. You still got the reigning MVP who's playing even better than last season in Philadelphia, chasing. Mm-hmm. You've got a Cleveland team that's suddenly hot. You've got a Knicks team that's better and has won 10 out of 12 games. So you got a lot going. And they're looking at this going, you know what? We're not going to win like this, so now what? And it's a shame that falls on Adrian Griffin. But in terms of Doc Rivers, he looks at that and how, if you want to coach and you want to give this one more shot, one more reasonable shot, why not with them? And last note, does anybody maybe reminds me, maybe this is a stretch, but that Kevin Garnett energy, Giannis have some of that and some of that purpose, and Giannis
Certainly
was critical of the way the team was playing, his own team was playing. Okay, now that's going to fall on him. That's going to fall on Giannis first, not Dame. Giannis has got to bring that in the same way Kevin Garnett brought it for Doc Rivers' championship team in 2008.
But it took Doc bottling that up and making that work in a system in Boston. And I think you mentioned something that highlights a huge aspect of this. It feels like for everyone, it's like this is his last shot, kind of, right? And that highlights this idea that everybody in Milwaukee is under pressure. I know the coach just exited. Now there's a new coach. Giannis is under pressure.
Right.
Dame is under pressure. And what I thought about the timeline here, you've seen the Milwaukee Bucks make two really big swings. The first swing was Giannis putting pressure on the system, and what did that amount in? A player change. Out goes Drew Holiday, in comes Dame Lillard. And that had huge implications. I think people thought, oh, the offense is going to be good. We've been a serviceable defense. We'll be all right. But we've seen how difficult and how uniquely difficult that has been to make that change. And then the second one is obviously this coaching change. And I do think that it can work because the most important thing that Doc will bring is being able to have that veteran experience to manage the stars. And I think there's also like some sub-layers to this. He has a lot of experience in pick and roll basketball. We talk about Lob City, Chris Paul to DeAndre to Blake Griffin, even the newest iteration with the Sixers, James Harden to Joel Embiid. There's a little bit of managing stars in pick and roll where we sort of expected more of that from Milwaukee. But at the end of the day, we've seen two really big swings from player change to coach change. And then the next swing, I know this is not a baseball program, but like it could be a strikeout. That's the pressure that they're under, knowing that these are significant changes to maximize on this window. I think Doc is uniquely positioned to do well, but at the same time, the consequences are going to be very, very high.
So, Perk, you've played with Doc. The question here is, will Doc fix the issues that the Milwaukee Bucks have?
You know what? I feel like this, right? Wilbon touched on the Kevin Garnett piece, and I'm glad that he brought up the 2018 because this is the closest team to that Doc has had an opportunity to coach, meaning championship ready. The one thing Doc will do is put those guys in position to be successful offensively. He will make them guys buy into their roles. He would, exploit their two-man game. And Shanae touched on the point where a lot of people are speculating that this could be Doc's last chance. Well, I'm going to say this. This is Doc's last chance. If he don't get it done with this group and Giannis and Dame, meaning at least making a finals run, right, for minimum, max winning it all, I don't think Doc will get another opportunity to coach. And I hate to say it, but it's the truth because we all know how I feel about Doc Rivers. But at the end of the day, I don't feel like the problem is solved yet.
Right.
It's still got to be some pieces moved with the personnel.
And Perk touched on this. We go back to something that Shanae said about managing stars. Let's face it, managing stars is different in the NBA. It is unique to all professional sports worldwide, to managing stars. And that is a critical thing for Doc, specifically Giannis. Remember, it's in the last 10 days or so that Giannis was critical. And by the way, I'm not saying it unjustly so. I mean, it sounded perceptive when at the lectern, I think it was after a game, when Giannis talked about the way they were playing or not playing, defensively what they needed to do. And so now Giannis is going to have to take co-ownership of this. I mean, the star player, it's the only sport with unlike the NFL, the star player, it falls on Giannis even more, even though he's won a championship, than it does on Doc.
Giannis was very enthusiastic about the hiring of Adrian Griffin. He sat with the three final candidates, Nick Nurse, Kenny Atkinson from Golden State, Adrian Griffin. I remember talked to Adrian Griffin about this in training camp. And he sat with a notebook and a couple number 2 pencils, and he had questions for him. He took notes. He was a part of that process. His voice was more than heard in that process. And so I think there's ownership all over the map in Milwaukee for how this went for a first-time, first-year head coach. I think they think Adrian Griffin's going to be a good head coach in the NBA. They didn't think he could close the gap on the level of a coach he needed to be to win in this very tight window. But Doc Rivers comes in with a lot to prove. He has a stretch and a run as a head coach in Game 7s in the second round of the playoffs in both the Eastern Conference and Western Conference, where there's a hump for him to get over. And they didn't just bring him to Milwaukee to get out of the second round, which he didn't do in 3 years in Philadelphia. They brought him there to get him to the finals, to give them a chance to win a championship. I don't know that this is going to be, he's going to do miracle work. I don't know that they're going to go for the 22nd defense in the league back into the top 7 or 8. They can get better. This is not a team built to be very good defensively, but can they get into the top 15 It's a top 3 offense, though, in the league.
Right. Are they going to beat the Boston Celtics?
They could if they address exactly what Woj said. And I think there's something, I was digging in the numbers because a lot of people say, oh, their defense has to get better. They don't have much room to move personnel. They actually have opportunities there, and I do think it matters to coaching. When Lopez and Giannis are on the floor, the Bucks have a top 5 defense. When those 2 players are on the floor, they have a top 5 defense, statistically. So there are opportunities for them to be a better defensive team.
Yeah.
But it's more like, are you bought in on transition defense? Are you bought in on your rotations? You're going to see a lot of things that are uncharacteristic of professional level basketball that they're showing that, like, maybe they weren't hearing the coaches or buying in. And I think that's why they made this change.
You went, I don't know if we're going to beat the Boston Celtics. Yes or no?
Look, I can't be objective when it comes to Doc Rivers. You talk about growing up. Listen, this goes back to teenage years,
I'm
and I
just saying
root
that's
for.
the litmus test.
I am biased. Let me declare my bias.
Yeah.
I root for Doc Rivers. I do. I mean, this goes back 100 years. Do I think, though, if I take that hat off, that they are the better team than the Boston Celtics, who have just as much incentive, if not more, right? They haven't won.
Yeah.
They're looking at this. Tatum and Brown are looking at this being the $600 million men. That organization feels they need to hang a banner. Milwaukee's had one since they have. Well, they're going to beat Boston. Wow, I don't know that I see that, but we got a long way to go, Malika, a long way to go.
Perk, last word on this.
And let me say this. Woj talked about Giannis pulling out his notebook. He need to pull out his notebook again, and he also need to pick up his cell phone and call Kevin Garnett and get some advice from Kevin Garnett on how to be able to be a player for Doc Rivers and learn on how Kevin Garnett sacrificed so much, right, offensively and lost himself in the team for the betterment of the team. So if Giannis want to make sure that this marriage between him and Doc Rivers is a perfect marriage, that's one that's going to last, one that's going to be great with multiple anniversaries, meaning multiple titles, he needs to take his notebook out and actually call Kevin Garnett and take notes and learn his coach that he has right now in Doc Rivers.
Last thing, you talk about personnel in Milwaukee. They do not have the assets to really make any real upgrades ahead of the trade deadline. They use the trade deadline to upgrade, in their minds, in the coaching position. They have gassed a lot of assets to keep a group around Giannis Antetokounmpo that could compete for a championship. And it's worked. They've extended this window a long time. But Philly, they have a chance to get better. Boston can add to their team. Miami just did it with Terry Rozier, who's going to be, I think, really, really good in that system. The improvement in Milwaukee, it's going to start with Doc Rivers in maximizing the group that they do have there now. I don't know that there's much more help available to them to come.
The East is now as interesting as the West, which was not the case a month ago. With Miami's addition of Rozier, Doc Rivers going to Milwaukee like this, Embiid upping it, right? And the Knicks playing the way they have, having won 10 to 12. Who would think we would said that a month ago, that the East is this fascinating?
For the Milwaukee Bucks, it's going to have to come from within. Yep. And I would be very curious to see whether or not Doc Rivers feels like he has a better chance to win here with this group in Milwaukee than he did with his group in Philadelphia.